Feroz, welcome to our podcast.
Everyone, thank you very much.
As you know, you're our first guest in our new studio, if I may call it like that. So we're very happy to have you.
I feel so privileged.
I don't know whether we're kind of this rare breed of people who like tax. I think we're the minority. Certainly most people I come across are kind of look at me blankly when I say that I did tax. Why did you choose a career in tax?
Why not?
Good answer.
I think tax is a very noble job. We help our client to pay the right amount of tax. And by paying the right amount of tax, we help the government run the country. What's the government? I mean, Mauritius, we don't have natural resources. The government major source of revenue is tax. And through tax, we help children go to school, policing, street lighting, roads. So I think us tax advisors, making our client pay the right amount of tax is the right thing to do. Now, on a more technical aspect as well, tax keep on evolving. I'm not one of these academic person where you just pass your exam and you're done. With tax, you're constantly learning. I mean, not only, from what changes in your local budget, your finance act, but also in terms of OECD, Pillar 2s. I mean, if you stop learning and you don't keep pushing yourself in tax, you phase out. And I think this is what really gives me the buzz.
It keeps you on your toes.
Keep me on my toes, exactly. So,
what do you have to say about those people who would say that we tax advisors help people to pay less tax?
Well, I don't think that's correct. Like I've been saying, we help our client pay the right amount of tax. And obviously, where we feel that our clients are being told to pay more than what's needed, obviously we need to react and we need to defend our client. But the client pays tax based on the framework and the laws that are in place. So if we help our client, the perception is, we help our client pay less tax or avoid tax, I think that's totally unfair, because as a professional, we're bound by ethical guidelines and we don't do tax avoidance. Tax planning is legal. I mean, you're a lawyer and everyone should know that, as tax advisors, we make client pays within the laws and regulations as it stands. So some client, like I said, can be told to pay in excess, but that's where the client engage tax advisors to make sure that they are not being exploited as well.
So do you think, when you look back at when your journey started as a tax advisor, would you say that the world is, obviously we're all aware of the international tax developments, but would you say the world is very different in terms of what is now acceptable as tax planning compared to what it was 20 years ago?
Well, you make me sound old 20 years ago, but
I'm pretty sure we're on the same age, so that's okay.
Yeah, I think, back in the days, I started in a medium practice in the UK. And I used to do accounting, I used to do bookkeeping and tax as well. And I trained in the UK, and the UK, is not perceived to be a tax haven. So we're very strong in terms of compliance and all that. When I moved back to Mauritius in 2012, and if I look at 2012 and now, the world has evolved. Now with BEPS coming into play, as you know, we can't even do treaty tax planning, because with BEPS and the amendments in the treaty, with the introduction of principal purpose tests, I think even if a client genuinely is going for a structure where there is commercial substance and there's a commercial rationale to go into transaction, it can always be kind of related to a tax advantage.
Sure.
So it's getting very, very difficult, I think, in my opinion. Even if a client wants to genuinely do a structure, it can easily be perceived, like I said, it can easily be perceived
as tax avoidance.
As tax avoidance.
You're now in the industry, you were in private practice for a long time. Do you see a massive shift in terms of how you do your job?
Well, I am kind of in industry, but within IQEQ, where I am right now, we have Taxand Mauritius. And Taxand Mauritius is a tax practice
Sure. Okay.
within IQEQ. I think we're one of very few management companies which actually have a tax practice. Many people don't know, but Taxand Mauritius is affiliated to Taxand Global,
Right.
which has presence in almost 50 countries in the world. IQEQ itself, we're present in about 24 countries now. IQEQ Mauritius expanding in Africa, India, and Dubai. So I think moving from practice where I was into IQEQ and Taxand, I've got the benefit of both the strong network of IQEQ and the strong network of Taxand as well.
So it's kind of a hybrid role then. You've got one foot in
I've
private
got two
practice.
hats. I've got several hats, but one of them is the head of tax for IQEQ, but I'm also an executive director in Taxand Mauritius, where we provide a vast range of services like compliance, advisory. We help clients in tax litigation. We apply for rulings, structuring, and so on and so forth. What I see more, though, from my role in practice is we get to meet the investors. And this is something that probably in practice, we used to get a lot of work from network where the structure is already there, say from the US, and we're providing our comments from a Mauritius perspective. Here, we're meeting the investor, we're engineering the structure, we're designing the structure. Most importantly, if I give you a very simple example, we know at the moment substance is a hot topic. So probably if I was in practice, I would say to the client, if you were to take partial exemption, you need to make sure you have X and Y. And we would caveat it to the extent you have X, Y, and Z, we're taking partial exemption, make sure you have it. Whereas now, when I'm in IQEQ, we need to implement these measures. We need to educate our local directors what they need to do in order for them to be conducting SIGA in Mauritius. Whenever we give an advice to a client, it's not just we give the advice on paper and that's it. We need to make sure that the company secretarial team are executing the advice, the local director makes sure the advice gets implemented. So it's a different ball game. I'm very grateful to have been in practice in PwC where I was. It's been a massive...
How long were you there for?
I was there for 9 years.
Wow.
It's been a very good time of my life. I've learned a lot. I had the best teachers, as in the best partners. But now the opportunity that Sridhar, he's the regional managing director, has given me at Taxand and IQEQ is basically implementing everything that I've learned in practice.
I spent a short amount of time in-house when I was back in the UK. It's, as you said, it's a different ball game because it's easy to print or to draft a 100-page opinion, but to actually be in the operations and making sure it actually happens is different.
Definitely. And I think the client interaction that we have is much more amazing as well because, you're making sure whatever we've advised the client in terms of structure, the client can see the end-to-end benefit of it. My role at IQEQ does not evolve just around tax. I also work a lot with our business development team, and we do road shows, we meet potential investors, and I think that's really amazing. It's not just a technical role, it's evolved from a technical role to a commercial. Yeah. I work very closely with my business development team, and I find this really fascinating. What we do is not just about selling IQEQ to clients. We sell Mauritius as a jurisdiction. And I think that's where it's very important, not just us, many management companies, big fours, regulators, and probably the MRA, we need to be aligned.
Of course.
What we've seen very often is we're out there promoting Mauritius as a tax-friendly jurisdiction.
And then the MRA is holding us back.
And then the client gets some nasty surprises later on. So I think there should be a bridge between us promoting Mauritius, how we sell Mauritius, and the experience that the client actually have when they come to Mauritius. I think that's very important.
Yeah, it's very timely that you've mentioned that, because it leads me to my next question. With everything that we've had to change, we've had to abolish the deemed foreign tax credit regime. We are seeing a bit more aggressivity from the MR in terms of tax assessments. What do you think now in 2023 are, let's say, 3 of the main challenges that Mauritius faces from a tax perspective?
Well, it's probably more than 3, but I think on top of my head, we had a major change in the tax regime. We said Mauritius is moving towards a jurisdiction of substance. Tax credit is no longer automatic. You need to have substance in Mauritius, but there's a commercial reality that we need to know. I mean, we have many holding companies in Mauritius. Mauritius is known to be a holding company jurisdiction. You have companies investing in debt, in equity, or a combination of debt and equity. Now, these companies, they don't really have employees in Mauritius. They are run by a board of directors where you have 2 local directors making decisions on behalf, actively taking part in board meetings. But many of the accounting functions are done by management companies.
Sure.
If you look at these companies, do they need someone full-time to be employed? Many times you'll see you have an investment holding company that have one investment. And
passive, most of the
exactly.
time it's a passive investment.
And in that investee company, it's that company that the company has actually provided a loan. Now, if for substance purposes, the tax authority is saying you need to have employees in Mauritius, the question that we need to ask, we need to be pragmatic. We can have a full-time employee to do what? Do you see where I come from? The functions are being done by management companies. The decisions are being made by the local directors through board meetings being chaired and held from Mauritius. But if we are being told to have employees in Mauritius, having a full-time employee for an investment holding company, is that commercially rational, feasible? Then we need to, in a way, we've seen assessments on investment holding company where local directors are taking decision. Maybe they don't have officers, they don't have employees, but can they afford to have employees to do? That's something that still needs to be addressed. That's in terms of substance. I think we have guidelines in a way. We have guidelines for the limit of practice, but what exactly does the tax authority want? I think none of us know.
Which probably is related to the point of what investors are often looking for is certainty.
When there is uncertainty, this is where investors shy away. We still need to be reassured of what is it exactly substance mean for investment holding, because what it means for me and you, we've seen is being challenged as we speak. That's one thing. I think the other challenge that I think we face at the moment, another hot topic we've seen, again, in terms of global business investing in India, we think that we're going to get the reduced withholding tax rate. Under the Mauritius India DTA, if you hold more than 10% shareholding in an investee company in India, the withholding tax rate is reduced to 5% compared to 20%. Historically, India had dividend distribution tax, but now they've introduced withholding tax. And again, here we've seen some challenges from the Indian tax authority in terms of beneficial ownership of Mauritius GBC. All of these GBCs, they have a TRC saying they are resident in Mauritius, but whether they are the actual beneficial owner of that dividend to be able to claim the reduced withholding tax from India. We've seen some articles from India. We've seen
where
some challenges where they're saying you need to have office in Mauritius, you need to have employment in Mauritius. So what we're doing at the moment, we are working with our Taxand counterpart in India. They are on the ground in India. They talk to the Indian tax authorities, and what is the Indian tax authorities looking for, or what are the areas that they are challenging. We're going to do a webinar with Taxand India, and we can share some insight from people from India to say what they expect, or at least what they believe the Indian tax authorities are expecting from companies in Mauritius to pass the beneficial ownership test, for instance. I think many companies receiving dividend from India, they're going to face this challenge. And this is a real cash flow challenge, because if you are receiving $1 million, now you're receiving 800 and not 200,000 is cash tax.
Of course.
So I think that's a major challenge.
And is India still, from your experience, obviously when the treaty was amended a few years ago, it kind of, a lot of people said that was the end of India for Mauritius. Is it still very much relevant?
Well, many people, this was the end of global business in Mauritius, but we're still here.
Sure.
If that was the end, then I think that would have confirmed that people come to Mauritius just for tax. Sure. We still have companies being incorporated for investment in India, and it shows that we're not just here in Mauritius for the treaty benefit. So we have this infrastructure, we have the know-how, we have the relationship with India, and I mean the treaty is gone on capital gains for shares, but there's a whole debt market, securities, more favorable compared to other jurisdictions like Singapore, for instance. We've got a reduced withholding tax rate on interest. So we're still seeing incorporation into India, and it obviously slowed down, but it's still there.
The market, the potential
exactly,
is still there.
Probably the third challenge that we face, and what we've seen in practice, is in terms of transfer pricing. We always say that you need to have revenue recognized where there is value creation.
Sure.
I think that's a bit of a catch-22. On one hand, we want the revenue to be recognized in Mauritius.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we talk about value creation. And what we've seen on some of our clients is where they are trying to recognize that the work is being done somewhere else, and there need to be an element of cost being reflected for the work that's being done somewhere else, and you have challenges from the tax authorities. So the question is, how much revenue needs to be recognized in Mauritius for the value that is being created in Mauritius? And I think for that, we probably need formal transfer pricing legislation in Mauritius. I mean, how much is the right amount? We've got many investment holding companies in Mauritius having royalty income, for instance.
Yeah.
And I mean, the labs are not based in Mauritius. The research, the innovation are not based in Mauritius, but we want all the revenue to be taxed in Mauritius. So the question here is, how much value is being created in Mauritius for billions of dollars to be taxed in Mauritius? So I think we've seen clients face these challenges.
Do you think the MR is being, I mean, I've had the same experience as you. Do you think they're being a bit greedy?
Well,
this is a safe space.
It's a safe space on camera, Joanne. So they certainly have some arguments where they think they're right. We have arguments to defend our clients. And at the moment, in the absence of a formal transfer pricing legislation, we refer to the OECD guidelines. But I think we need to have a framework for Mauritius that we can use, and client can have that certainty within that TP framework. And I think for some years now in the budget, there has been an announcement that they're going to bring transfer pricing. I think it's about time. It's high time that we formalize. At the moment, we're just basing ourselves on one piece of legislation, which is Section 75, but it's about time we have a formal framework and guideline that we can use and we can challenge as well. You can't challenge something that you don't have.
Exactly.
And this is what's happening at the moment, I think.
And even the OECD transfer pricing guidelines I find are tricky to use as well, because we may rely on it, but then you also have the MRA who may say, and they have in the past, I actually have one case at the moment where they say, we don't have to follow. It's not binding on us. We can have a look at it, but we don't have to follow. So again, it rejoins that point about having certainty for investors, being able to safely advise your clients, look, these are the rules, these are the framework, this is the framework in which you need to operate. So I agree with you 100% on that. Coming back to substance, you mentioned about, being practical in your advice. Let's put pure equity investment holding companies to the side. Let's talk about, mixed equity and debt or other types of substance for partial exemptions, such as for CIS managers, etc. How important do you think the role of a management company is for the purposes of meeting SIGA?
Well, I think management companies should play probably the most vital role. I think we have a duty to educate the local directors. I mean, not just the local directors, the foreign directors as well. We always say that, the framework has changed in Mauritius. The Finance Act 2018 has brought major changes in the tax regime. But if we continue to do business the same way, if we continue to run board meetings the same way that has been traditionally run, or decisions are being approved by a written resolution, but then what's changed? There need to be a drastic change where local directors are involved, actively involved in decision making. I'll give an example, debt financing. And if you have a company which has a historical loan, these loans now need to be retabled at the board meetings. The rationale of how the interest rate is being computed, what are the factors? When you look at interest rate transfer pricing, most of the time, they're all related party. And the interest rate is determined by the level of risk.
Of course.
Your risk appetite, the borrower's risk appetite. Do they have the financial capability to borrow that amount of money? If they'd gone to the bank, would they have got that amount of loan? That would determine the
All these
risk.
questions were probably not asked the first time the loans were approved.
Well, the first time of the loan, we had the deemed foreign tax credit. There was no requirement for these loans to be basically discussed as such in board meetings. It would discuss for substance purposes, but it wasn't relevant for tax exemption. But now that it is, I think the existing loan need to be retabled. What used to be an interest rate maybe 10 years ago, the risk appetite of the company 10 years ago might not be the same as today. It has to be redone where it is actually, I think most importantly, you can have a board meetings. I don't think at some point the MR is going to ask you to send you a recording of your board meetings. What's important is, in case of a challenge, how you defend yourself. So I think your documentation is very important. It could happen that, there is a board meetings where the loan has actually been tabled, discussed, the interest rate has been benchmarked, the interest rate has been analyzed. There could have been pushed back and forth. But if that's not being documented properly,
how do you prove it?
How do you prove it? So I think there's two elements here. One is the actual discussion that happened in the board meetings with the presence and the participation of the local directors. It's not just that whatever rate is being, gone the days where you table and approve.
Yeah.
It has to be discussed, it has to be pushed back, it has to be analyzed, challenged, benchmark and all that. And then you've got the second element where the board minutes has to capture this discussion and has to reflect in the board minutes, because in times of challenge, your best line of defense is basically your documentation.
Yeah, I agree, and that's been my experience as well. I always tell clients that. And also, when I am conscious we're focusing on one tiny exemption here. There's the subject is vast, but the ongoing monitoring as well, because you need to show how you risk managing that loan. So how do you show that if you have no processes, no documentation,
Definitely.
no policies in place? I feel we should do a separate webinar on that topic. There's so much to talk about. So going back to your team that you've basically, I presume you built from scratch, or maybe there was an existing team, I don't know. How do you train your team? How do you train your team to think like you?
Well, when I joined IQEQ, when I joined, there were two managers that were basically on their way out. So I was left with one intern.
Wow.
Yeah,
you started with one intern. Wow.
Today we almost 10. And I've recruited from other Big Four, and I have to say that the people that I have today, I feel blessed and lucky, because obviously you're nothing without your team.
Sure.
And in Taxand, we're like a family. We look after each other. And the people that I've recruited from other Big Four as well, so we've got that Big Four culture and mentality. Is the experience that they bring. Also, we're expanding and we're recruiting at junior level so that we train our people and make them grow as we grow Taxand as well. So nearly 2 years in Taxand now, we've achieved a lot in terms of people, in terms of figures, in terms of client relationship, in terms of workload. And when I look back, I think it's been a terrific move. I feel more empowered. The support that I've got from my regional MD and also the other heads has been amazing, because my clients are basically IQEQ clients, and you need to have that introduction, and this guy's been fantastic. And we've seen that with clients that we've been working on as well. We've grown our tax compliance base, because that's your bread and butter. Yeah. And through our compliance client, we get advisory, we get litigation and all that. So I think it's been a very interesting move. I don't look back for 1 second, I think.
And I'm sure it's just the beginning as well. I mean, if you've grown, to 10 people in the space of 2 years, I mean,
who knows?
The best is still to come. So last question for you, Feroz. In a few months, we're probably going to get requests for proposal for the budget this year. If you had a wish list, what would be on your wish list?
Well, probably the first thing would be, that solidarity levy that was introduced at 5% and was increased to 25%. I think we all had this thought that it was temporary because of COVID, but now it seemed to be permanent. And also, the limit of 3.5 million coming down to 3 million. Today, someone earned 3 million after tax, and say you have a loan. I mean, it's not really living the high life. I think,
especially with the increase in the cost of living.
Exactly. I think if solidarity levy was meant to be, let's say, a Robin Hood tax, to tax the rich to distribute to the poor, but I think that 3 million needs to be revised, because that's no longer a limit to say you're living the high life. So,
and also I think it, as you said, if the aim is to really go for the ultra wealthy, then you shouldn't be penalizing that middle section.
Exactly.
Those who are earning between 3 and 5 million, because they're the ones who are hit the hardest. They're the ones paying the 40% marginal tax. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think in the context of COVID, it could have been, but now it need to be, especially like you said, the cost of living is increased so much. The other thing I would say, I mean, I've already mentioned it. I think it's high time we formalize transfer pricing. There has been many assessments on transfer pricing without proper framework in Mauritius, and that leaves kind of a bit of uncertainty.
And we have no case law. I mean,
exactly. So
it's new. It's a new area. Yeah.
It's about time we formalize transfer pricing rules in Mauritius. I think that would really help Mauritius as a jurisdiction. You've got certainty. It would bring confidence to investors. At least on what ground you are being challenged and how you can actually defend.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Feroz, for your time. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Privileged to be here today.
Super.